Okay, so welcome everybody. Welcome to this internship program. So before starting, if you have any questions, you can type in your questions in the Q&A section. And then for the first few minutes, we'll address as much as possible, and then we'll start today's session. If you have any questions, please type in the Q&A section. Okay, so I have seen people asking some silly questions in the Skype group that will it work or will it not work. It's better if you try it yourself and you'll come to know whether it will work in free or whether it will work in the fixed format. So instead of asking in the group, first try it yourself. And then if you face any issues, then you can ping us in the group. This internship program is for you guys, so try to utilize it as much as possible. And also these sessions are telecasted on YouTube. So if anybody has any issues joining on Zoom, they can watch this live on YouTube as well. If you have any questions, please type in. Otherwise, we'll start with today's session. Okay, so I think there are no questions. Great. So till now, whatever topics we have covered, they were specific to the IBMI world. But today's topic is more of a generic topic, which will apply in the all software development field. And the topic is coding standard and the naming conventions. And today we have Ashish with us. So Ashish, you can take over and share your screen.
To others who are going to review the code. I would say that your code is going to talk for you, not me, not your seniors, not anyone who's representing you. So it may be a case that I represent you being the lead for your team, but I might not talk about the way you write the code or the more capable you are to the client, or the client might miss it as well, even if I say so. So what is going to talk for you is going to be your code, the way you write it, the way you demonstrate your skills in writing the code, that is going to speak for you. So make sure that you do not forget to make yourself representable in a proper way when you are delivering a code to a client, to your friend, to yourself when you are developing it for just for temporary or testing purpose. Make sure that you start writing the code always in a standard manner. I hope I'm making things clear. If anybody has any queries, they can raise hands and later on post this PPT gets over, you can go ahead and ask questions. Okay. So starting with the naming conventions. Naming conventions play a very vital role in representing what the code is. See, I can just write var1, var2, var3, var4, but that doesn't make any sense. It does the work. We are not talking about doing work. We are talking about representing it in a proper manner. So that variable one, which you have declared as var1, would be the first name, might be the last name, would be the customer number, would be the part number, would be the order number. But if you just give it as a standard or a pale name, which is like var1, var2, it's not going to make any sense to the person who's going to review it or to the person who's going to later on work on it. So beginning with the first item that we have in this list, sorry for this. Earlier we had a limitation in RPG 400 where we were not able to give proper names to the variables, to the subroutines, because we had a limitation of 6 characters. Now that has been eliminated with RPG4 and the new standards that we have, or the new version of RPGs that we have, the RPG free. So we can go beyond 6 characters. We can give a proper name to a variable. Like here in this, we see that we have a CUSTNUM, but that can also be represented or written in a proper way. A full name like customer number, a part number, an order number. So it becomes easier for a person to read. RPG is very fast language. Like it's it's optimized a lot better, but due to its limitation of naming conventions that we were facing earlier, it had a bad reputation. That has been now taken, like IBM has taken a lot of efforts to like improvise that reputation. And because of these naming conventions that were not up to mark, COBOL, which is a very user-friendly language and a very English-like language, was used or preferred than RPG. Not only the naming conventions, but also the RPG logic cycle, which was one of the factors. Whenever we are naming an item, be sure that you name it fully. So make it describable, like as I said, customer number, part number, order number. Here it has mentioned that we should not go beyond 14 or 10 characters, but I would not say that uh, we should limit ourselves. So if you are writing a function or a name or say a procedure that is like get uh, amount in words, if it is going or it is crossing more than 14 characters, let it cross. But make sure that your procedure is having a proper name. It is tied up tightly to what the function is being performed inside that procedure. Sending a numeric value to it, and then it is sending you back what we say what we say a word format of that number. Say it's it might be a module or a procedure used for getting the amounts in word to print on checks. So if you're sending like 14,345 rupees and 37 paisa, so if it is printing or it is returning you a value that is in a clear words, make sure that your procedure name should be also matching to the content of the code that is inside that procedure. So you can name it as get amount or get amount in words, something like that, which should be more tying up to the function that is done inside that procedure. Using camel case gives a clarity and is being widely used by not only iSeries but other languages as well. So non-iSeries platform, they have been using camel casing from a long while. What does camel casing mean? Is that the first character of any verb or a noun is made into uppercase. So if you see here, the C in the customer number for the variable, they have made the first letter of the customer number, the first character in an uppercase. Then the number, whenever there is a cut or whenever there is a shift from a variable in a variable with a noun or a verb, and a new verb or a new noun starts, the first letter or the first character of that verb or noun is then again made uppercase, and then the rest value is lowercase. So this is called camel casing. I hope most of them are already aware, but I'm just giving a brief idea on that. Earlier, we had a standard of using special characters to names, to variables, like at the rate was used, ampersand was used, not ampersand, dollar sign was used, pound sign, the hash sign was used. That is a long gone bad practice. We should not use that. Now RPG allows us to give proper names, so we should make use of that rather than like limiting ourselves with a dollar or a pound in the beginning of that variable. Not only for the clients, but whenever you are developing a code for yourselves, as I said earlier, make sure that you start writing it in a standard way. And I'll give you few more tips or benefits of doing that in a standard way later on. Okay, getting back to this point, every company that has been there outsourcing work to us or other companies would always have their standards that are being followed from a long while. Those might be outdated or those might be updated as they grew. Make sure that you always ask your client if they have any standard document and always comply to their standards rather than yours. But if they do not have, make sure that you straight away jump onto the latest standard available in the market. Okay, I hope that the first slide is clear. Second one, we'll go to examples later on, but I'll just jump onto these slides so that every part or every item in these slides are covered. We use subfiles, and subfiles are given like the record formats are given names. Now, I'm not saying that this is the standard that is being used. Every company has their own standards of defining the names for their record formats for their files. Make sure that you always comply to that one. Do not use your own because you'll have to later on modify to make your code fit or make your uh, sub file or your display files or your programs fit into their standards, because they would be using some tools to deploy those, like turnover, Alden, the change management tools. So you'll have to later on modify. So make sure that you always stick to your client's standards, and whatever they are using, go according to that. Okay. Whenever you are declaring any variable inside those display files, make sure that those are according to the standards. Here we are seeing that we have record formats as EMP D1, EMP D2. Accordingly, the field names inside are also declared with D1 customer number, D1 part number, this way. So this is an example. Most companies do use these kinds of standards, but make sure that you always ask your client for a standard document or a standard process that they are following, and accordingly apply the same when you are developing applications, softwares, or code for them. Work variables, as I said, we had this over here, work variables. So the work variables, like I would say, this is also a long gone practice. We should not use work variables at a global level. We have a global level as well as a local level. Always avoid using global variables, because global variables are the ones that lead to errors or lead to failures in a long run. The more global variables, the more chaos. Always avoid to do that. Like parameters as well. I would say that here we have mentioned we should have a prefix of p underscore, but I would suggest not having that. I would suggest having, depending upon the type of parameter or the purpose of the parameter is, if it is an in, if it is an out. Most of us have also seen that our RPG programs get called by a third party application or a non-iSeries application using an SQL stored procedure. And in SQL stored procedure, you have to clearly define what is in parameter and what is an out and what is an in out parameter. Now this comes handy at that time. So if you start naming your program's incoming parameters with in and out and having a constant declared to an in parameter and declaring by reference to the out parameter, any person who's going to open your program to understand what parameters are in, what parameters are out, he's going to get a clear picture of it, and he would be able to design a stored proc to that. Now, the other thing is that non-iSeries developers are also working on iSeries platforms. So it becomes easier for them as well to understand. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay, so this part mostly defining data is declaring about declaring variables in the DSpecs, declaring name constants using literals and compile time arrays, multi-occurrence data set. This all comes into DSpecs for free format or the RPG4. We have a DSpecs wherein we declare those. We'll jump onto the code to understand how these are. But I'm just giving you an overview that we have a DSpecs where all the declarations of variables, standalones, constants, data structures, everything should be in the DSpecs. In RPG3, RPG400, we could declare while we were writing the code in the C specs by giving it as the type or the length to it. We should not use that anymore. We should not use that anymore. That is mostly in the fixed format. Now we are going to use the free format most of the time. So any client who's above V7 R2 would be having the all free enabled with all the PTFs installed. So you can start using all free over there. As I said, like RPG code, it was not that readable or user friendly when it came to earlier days. Now it is pretty much user friendly and is easy to read and easy to understand. But earlier we were not having that much of leverage to give long names. to functions, to subroutines, to variables, which created kind of a dilemma of what was happening inside that code. And for that purpose, it was always recommended to have comments given properly to what the code was doing. So if you are writing a program to get the employee master information, you would have a brief description of what the program was doing. Then every subroutine that was written or every procedure that was being written, you had a brief description of that written over there. Today as well, we follow the same practice, but with the naming conventions being pretty decent nowadays, we can reduce this or we can make it small, crisp, and precise to what is happening inside the code. Modification logs are the ones that are used whenever you are going to modify an existing program. So those should be updated as and when we touch any existing code. Then the next part is like comment should not echo your code. What this means is that it has been also observed that people write what every line of the code was doing inside a subroutine into the comment section of that subroutine, which does not help. Like that is just going to be a pseudocode that you have written again. It should not be that case. It should be a description or an understanding of what procedure is doing. So like if that subroutine is calculating taxes, you should like just calculating taxes using uh, fields from the tax table. This is this. That's it. You don't have to like taking this field, multiplying with the rate of interest and all those things. You don't have to write that. That already is there in the code. You don't have to do that again in the comment section. Here it has been described as differentiate your comment lines with white color. I would suggest that avoid using colors. Most of our new applications or new change management tools that have been used like Git, Tortoise SVN, many times those fail because the code that is on iSeries is in a different format. When it goes outside as an ASCII, these color codes create problems to functions that they have written in languages like Python, Go, C Sharp, and those break because of our color codes that we have used. So I would suggest do not use color code in your programs. So even for the comments for your modification log, I would suggest avoid doing that. Not going to go for this last one. It is not much that I can talk about. For the next part, that is use free format. So as I said that anybody who is above V7R2, I would suggest going for all free. But if anybody is below that from V5R4, you can start using the normal free format. A normal free format would start with a slash free from V5R4, but post that V6R1, we do not have to use the slash free. With proper PTF supplied, we can start writing straight into free format without providing the slash free and slash end free directives. This is all related to the free format, writing new code, use free format, changing the existing code, use free format. Now for changing the code, I understand that most of us are going to work on existing applications and we are going to make changes to the existing applications. Considering that part, if you are going to modify a code and your change is going beyond 3 lines of code change, I would recommend that you move that piece of code into a procedure or into a subroutine as the code is. If it is using the advanced ways of using procedures, I would suggest that anything that you are going to modify beyond 3 lines, move that into a different location inside a subroutine or inside a procedure so that your code does not interact or gets injected into other piece of code that is already there. If it is just 2 or 3 lines of code maximum, be it in line of that code. But if it is more than that, move that inside a subroutine or inside a sub procedure. Indenting code, indenting data structures is very important. Every new language that is there right now has a standard indentation that is followed. Like for Python, it is 4 spaces or a tab. The same way RPG does not have anything of that sort, but it is advisable and recommended that whenever you are writing a code, it should be indented very well so that we understand the flow of the code. We understand the purpose of the code. We understand the subfields of a data structure. We understand the overlaid fields of a field inside a data structure. Earlier in RPG4, we would not be allowed to have blank lines. We always had to have a comment, always had to have a star or an asterisk at the 7th position to mark that as a commented line. But with RPG4, now we can have blank lines and we can group a proper set of function with few lines padded in the beginning and few lines added in the end. So it becomes easier for anyone to guess like this is the new routine that has started, or this is the new function that has started from here and it ends here. Okay. Now aligning the code. If you see the above expression where we are calculating the total pay by having something like the hours multiplied with the rate and then the uh, next hours multiplied by the rate and then some more calculations, like this statement does not make much of a sense when it comes for understanding in the first glance. But when we see the later statement, it gives you a clear picture of what is happening. Both work fine, both give you the same result, but when you see the second statement, it is more readable. A person can understand quickly what is happening on the second statement. Now, here we see some variables like 2, 1.5. These are some constant that are there. These are known as magic numbers. One should avoid using magic numbers and these should be declared as constant. Okay, understanding that the second one is overtime hours. So with the normal rate, they are also going to give them an additional bonus of 1.5. Considering that 1.5 is the overtime rate, you can have 1.5 declared in constant as overtime default rate. Okay, now the same thing goes with the next one, which is DBL hours. I don't know, it would be double hours. Maybe a person has done the next shift as well. So now these variables, these do not give a clear picture of what is happening. I have to guess it, correct? Now, if these were renamed properly, regular hours, overtime hours, double hours, these would have given a clear understanding of what these represent. Now 1.5 does not give me a clear picture. The same thing goes with the 2. Now when we are declaring, when we are using these kinds of magic numbers, make sure that you declare them in the constant, name them properly, like default overtime rate or default double hours rate, and then declare a 1.5 to the first one and then 2.0 to the next one. So the statement then would be overtime hours multiplied by the rate multiplied by the overtime or the default overtime rate, something like that, which becomes more readable. Whenever you are using RPG4 or RPG4 300, you would always have to use indicators to understand if a file was read correctly, if the record was changed properly, if a settler was successful. But nowadays we don't have to do that. We have built-in functions. However, in these conditions as well, there have been chances where people have not added the file name inside the built-in function. So in the next, in the second statement that we have, we just have a person found, which was used prior or post a chain operation. So a chain was done to a file with a key, and then we were looking for if the record was found. But we have not mentioned which file was to be checked or validated for the record to be found. So this is a bad practice. We should an empty built-in function. Instead, we should use %error built-in function. Make sure that the earlier statement has an error extender applied to it so that the error gets trapped, your program does not blow. But then you gracefully address that error using the if %error, and then you do the work that has to be done when there is an error that was found or observed on your statement. Okay, so make sure that you always use built-in functions rather using indicators. Okay, at the same time, whenever you're using built-in functions on files, make sure that you mention the file name there for end of file, for found. Make sure that you always use or always mention the file that you want to look into or you want to validate for the record found instruction. Okay, jumping on to the next one, structured programming techniques. Go to cab, xax, comp, like we do not have to use these. These are all outdated and old opcodes that were used, and those had already been identified as a deal breaker when it came to restructuring or refactoring the codes or understanding the code, because GoTo would jump on to any routine, uh, any place in the program, which was not advisable because the flow of the program was altered drastically with that. That created a lot of bugs. So that is advised. It is advised not to use GoTo, not to use branching, case on branch, and we should not use the opcodes like if, equal, if, not equal, if, greater than, like XX represent these things. So we should not use, instead we should use the latest things, like we have a if and then we have a proper condition. Do not use the if XX function opcodes or do until XX opcodes when XX opcodes. Make sure that you use the latest one, which is a proper one, which is if some condition, some statements will be between the end if, so that it is easier to understand, easier to maintain. Whenever you have a deep nesting of if statements, move it to a routine, move it to a sub procedure. An if statement depth should not go more than 3. It's not a recommendation, but it is advised it should not go beyond 3. So if you have 6 or 7 nested ifs within each if, make sure that whenever you are done with the second or third if, move the next piece of code that is for the if condition into a new subroutine or a new procedure and return values from there. You should never have large if statements. I have refactored for almost 1.5 years and I had faced a lot of trouble where a person had written a code to identify if it was an uppercase A till uppercase Z, and he had written that all in an if condition. So you would check if the variable that was passed was A, and then he would like look for the else part, And then in the else part, he would look for if it was B, and then in the else part again if it was C, and then again in the else part if it was D. He had written a code in that way, which was pretty lame, but I'm not sure it was written way back earlier, like 10 to 15 years earlier. So I would not know why that was written in that way. Maybe with the time spent of these 10 years, there was some piece of code which was within these if statements, which was later on eliminated or deleted. But I had seen that condition, which was a troublesome when my junior was trying to refactor that. We achieved that by just doing a scan, and then we had taken as constant from A to Z. We just scanned if it was within that. We did what was needed to do for that alphabet. Okay. Whenever you are writing, like the last one is a good one, like avoid programming tricks. So there are people who are there are engineers who are pretty smart. They write pretty optimized code, but it's not that every person is smart enough to understand what other has written. He might make mistakes, and there have been incidences where a person did not understand what was happening, and he did something which ended up in the existing code blowing up. So whenever you are using such kind of tricks, make sure that you write at least one line of comment before that code begins to make the person understand what you are doing with your optimized code. I'll give you an example of this later on. I have prepared one example. Yeah, the next is for the strings. Use name constants to declare a string instead of storing it in an array or table. So this is what has been observed, that sometimes there are um, there are error messages that are declared at the end of the program, inside tables, inside arrays, and those are used whenever there is an error that has happened. So we should avoid doing that. If there is an error that you want to display, declare a constant, give it a proper name, record not found, and then give a proper name to it, like proper description of what you are trying to do. Record not found in table, and then you can concatenate the table name. So do not use this practice of having messages uh, mm, or some things that you feel like the names of months at the bottom in the compile time array or in a table. Do not do that. Always declare them in a constant, as a constant inside your program, and start using them from there. The next one is for variable length. So with the latest enhancement that has happened in RPGLE, we are able to use varchar. So always avoid using a standard length of say 32 characters, 50 characters, 60 characters. Instead, try to use a varchar of that length. What would happen is whenever you are going to add a value to it, it is going to trim it properly. So you don't have to use the trim built-in function. And the second reason for this is that trim and %scan are the two most costly built-in functions when it comes to uh, the system CPU utilization. Always try to avoid trim. And to avoid trim, it is advised that you use a varchar or declare the variable as varchar. With that, it would automatically trim the values, and it would give you a trimmed value which you don't have to trim later on. Okay, I'll give examples of these as well. Remind me later. Yeah. Whenever it is nowadays suggested that anything that you develop, try to make sure that you make it modularized. What does that mean is that If you see that you're going to write a module or a procedure which is going to be of say 15 or 20 statement in length, and then there is a piece of code which you feel like that the last 5 lines of code is can be used for other other activities as well. Make sure you remove or you extract it from there and create a next or a new function of it or a new procedure of it so that that can be used. A simple example would be um, having a QCMD executed, or having a having a statement, SQL statement prepared and executed. So these are some functions that you use commonly, that you when you're writing an RPG code and you are using or you want to execute uh, a CL command. You always declare a QCMD and then you start writing the code. Better move it out as a procedure into a service program and then start using it from there. So this is what we are trying to convey over here. Using service programs, writing the code modularly is going to make your code more readable, more efficient, and more manageable. Using binding directives, this is advanced technique of ILE. Using binding directives where we would declare a binding directory in your program, and then that binding directory would have the service programs or the modules that would be used. Any module that has an export is going to be used by can be used by other programs without any issues. So in any case, if you want to declare a module or sorry a procedure, sorry about that, it should be a procedure that should be declared with an export so that it can be used. I see that we have consumed a lot of time, so I'm going to quickly jump on from this. Um, yeah, this is what we already declared, discussed. Like we should not use obsolete operation codes, opcodes. Like this was a long gone practice, like having program described files. Now we don't use that. So I'm not going to discuss much on this. I'm going to jump on to the code that I have prepared for. Let's go with the CL. So this is the CL that we have, and if you see in this CL, we have a proper documentation done where we are saying that these are the input parameters that are going to come. What would make sure that we give these variables a name that is easily understood by a person who's at least somewhat familiar to this application, or even for a person who's not familiar to this application. So this is FTP app name. So here we have such that this is the app name, and what would be the possible values that we would be expecting. This is the extract type. What would be the extract type? Either M or I. Now, this is the modification log. Modification log whenever we are, now this is a new program, that's why it does not have a modification log. But when say this program comes for an update, for any modification, here we would be writing the date, then the developer name, and then the case in the sense, most of the clients use Jira, Rally, or applications to track their work. So that case number should come here so that it becomes easier for their audits, or easier for their audit team to understand why this program was modified or for which case this was modified. Okay, these are the parameters. If in old code these parameters would come somewhere here, and then it would continue with the next one, with the next one, and the next one, and the next one. We are avoiding to do this. If there is a parameter that is going, is an incoming parameter or a parameter to this program, or is going to go as a parameter to the other program, we make sure that every parameter comes on a new line so that it becomes easier for anyone to manage, anyone to understand that there are 6 parameters or 5 parameters. Considering that there would be a change later on and we would add a new parameter inside or in between these, it would be an easier case where I would just add one line here and add that parameter between these. So there is just one line getting inserted. Okay. Now, whatever parameters are incoming parameters, we have declared them separately and also have tagged them with a comment of parameter variables. And then those which are like standalone used in the programs, we have made sure that those are segregated separately and are declared in a way that those are separated from the existing or the incoming parameters. Okay, now jumping on to the logic of the program. So here we are calling a program. Here as well, we see that we are sending one parameter. We are declaring or providing or coding one parameter on one line for this program. Now this becomes easier even when you are doing it and you are trying to guess how many parameters am I sending and how many parameters is the other program expecting. So it becomes easier here. Okay, if you have something that is going to take a lot much of your main program space, move it to a subroutine. So we have moved this to a subroutine. Then depending upon what the application type is, we are calling a subroutine going to the end. At the same time, if it is for a different application, we are calling a different subroutine and just going to the end. Okay, now what we are doing, we have mentioned here that we are going to create a backup path. We are going to create folders on IFS. These would be the folders. These are an example of what would be created. These are the crucial commands that would get executed. If you see here, even if it is a subroutine, we have indented with a 3 space. So there are 3 space in the beginning. Now, when it comes to conditions, considering that we might or we might not have a backup path, we have indented that as well with 3 spaces. So like this is what is indentation. We have 3 space indentation. It becomes easier for a person to understand that this is a part of this if condition. Easy enough to understand for any person. Here we have the select one in CL. So we have used select one the way we have in RPG. And here as well, we have indented the code. Okay. So this is all about the RPG. This is all about the CL that we have just for this training purpose. This is the if condition. So we have a maximum of 3. As I said earlier, if there is going to be anything more than this, we're going to move it into a subroutine or into a sub procedure or to a procedure. So always follow these good practices because these are not something which would consume a lot of your time, but these are going to definitely benefit you in the long run. When some person from the client is going to review your code, is going to be able to relate to your code easily and would be able to understand what is happening in your code easily. Okay. So this is for the CL that we have. Okay. I'll just go to and I'll just call this program. This is a sub file that I designed today morning, and this is something that we have. Now, if you see that I have the name, then I have the number, and then I have the email address here. Okay, and then there's a 3 dots added whenever that is going beyond the length of whatever this email field in the sub file is declared with. Okay, now I'll jump onto the RPG code. Yeah. Before jumping onto this, I would show you one more document. Now here we are talking about the structure of a procedure or a program. So program structure going to be an all free program. Then we are going to have a modification log. Then we would have the control specification, the edge specification. then the procedure interface. Nowadays, we don't need to have a procedure prototype because with the latest announcement, PR need not be declared if it is a program. Okay, then we would have all the external declarations of the functions of the copybooks. Then we would have the declarations of the data structures, the templates basically, then the standalones, then the constants, and then the main program would begin. Okay, so this would be the structure that we are following. Okay, we have adopted this one. So if you see, I don't have a modification log. This is a dummy program, but as I showed one that we had prepared for a client that had a modification log. Okay, here we have the control specification where we have declared the H keywords for the H specs, now known as the control options. Okay, we have the file declarations. Then we have the data structure templates. Always make sure that you declare templates in the beginning and then use them. Okay, I'll show you how we have used them. Okay, this is one template. This is the second template. If you see here, we have a star n. So if you have a variable that is just reserved or you just don't want to name it, you can have a star n declared to it. The name can be star n. Okay, and here what I've done is I've just initialized with the bracket, an opening round bracket, a closing round bracket, and a hyphen is declared. So I don't need them. Then I have the area code, the next three and the last four, same declared over here. Now we have declared this on purpose. I'll show you why we've declared this. Then coming on to the indicators, we have a display file. Okay, now what we are doing is we are declaring a pointer based on, a pointer which is going to be based on the address of the star in. Okay, and that is given an indicator name as indicator ds. The same is being used here. Now we haven't declared any name to it. That's why we have a star n over here. Now with the latest enhancement that we have, anything that we are declaring, we don't have to use an overlay. We can straight away use a position and then we can give the data type of that would be easy enough for any person to understand that this is an indicator and the position is 3 in this DS. Okay. Now here is the RRN that we have used for this subfile AZ1082DA. So I've given a name to that, like prefix to it, and then I've given a RRN, which is related to record number. What I've done later on is that I have passed this RRN because we have to always declare that global. And if you see in this code, we do not have global variables except the RRN. I would advise you should not have more than 3 or more than 5 global variables in your program. The more the global variables, the more the modularity of your code would get hampered and the more bugs in the near future. So to avoid this, let's have a maximum of 5 standalones, not more than that. And that too only in case if you require or if you need, else avoid as much possible. Avoid constant declaration as much possible in the global area. So this is the global area where we have the program beginning over here. Okay, and then we have the procedures here. Okay, so here we have passed this, and when I'm passing this, I've made sure that I renamed it to RRN. Okay, I can have something named coming here. Now I pass this by reference, so I'm going to always use the same address of the variable. Okay, this is not with a constant, this is a pass by reference. Okay, the variables that we had, the indicators, the clear indicator was a 73. So I've given the SFL clear and I've used true, false, not a star on or star off. That is a long on bad practice. Avoid using that. Start using named constant to it. Okay. Now what I am doing here is that I needed the employee name to be generated from the last name, the first name, and the middle name. And that was going to be a pretty much inline code. And I needed the same kind of a formatting for the email as well. Okay, so I was going to have two emails clubbed together. I have not taken the other one. This is the home email, and then there's a work email as well in the physical file. So considering this, I created a function state and I've given it a proper name, get formatted name, and then I'm passing name. Okay, the same way I've given a get formatted phone, and here I'm passing a numeric value. Okay, we'll jump onto this. Here I've given six parameters. Two of them are mandatory, and the rest of them are no pass. So they can be passed or they cannot be. They can be ignored. Okay, but at least one should be there. The first one is the length that you want this to return. I've taken a varchar of 500. Now if you see here, observe carefully, I've given options and a start trim over here. What this would do is whatever you pass to this function, it is going to trim that value. It is going to trim as soon as it receives that value, it is going to trim it. So you don't have to use a trim. So in this entire procedure, I haven't used a trim anywhere because my values that I've received are already getting trimmed with this keyword. Okay. The other thing is when I'm using a trim, I have to make sure that I'm using a varchar so that it reduces the size or the length of that variable. Okay. Now, the next is that what am I doing in this procedure is I'm going to format the name. So when I'm doing that, what I've done is I've given a get formatted name and then I'm going to return a formatted name. So this is resembling to what I am returning. I'm expecting that this procedure returns me a formatted name. So I've declared a variable with formatted name as a name to it. And this is what I'm going to return. Now this is a varchar. What I've done is as soon as I come here, I've moved the first name. And then if the second parameter is passed, I'm just going to the way we do an addition or an increment to any index, the same way I can do it for a character as well, which is a varchar. So I've given a plus to the same is equal to with a space and if name2 is passed. This way it would get clubbed, clubbed, clubbed. And now what happens is if the length that I have passed and the length of the formatted name do not match, then what I'm doing is I'm appending or the last three characters are set to a three dots to understand that this is a large enough value is not going to accommodate in the suggested length that has been passed to this procedure. Okay. Now the number is stored in normal numeric format, but when I'm going to display it, I'm going to display with a brackets. So if say the number is 9980123455. This I'm talking about a US client where the numbers would be displayed in this format. It would be in 998. Then we would have 012 and then a hyphen and then a 345. This is how this would get represented. To make this to achieve this, what I've done is I've declared two data structures in the beginning. And I've initialized the data structure with the values that I have given in the data structure. So these are the templates that I showed you earlier. I have declared them. So whenever I'm getting the numeric number from the earlier procedure, that numeric number I'm converting into character, doing an eval so that the number gets right aligned. Okay, once it gets right aligned, that goes into this data structure. Now this data structure already has the same fields that I've declared in the formatted phone data structure. Now what I'm doing is I'm doing an eval core, which is eval corresponding. So whatever is matching with phone number data structure, those all fields would get copied or moved, copied to the formatted phone subfields, and it would reduce an effort of moving one variable at a time. So these three are there. So the same would happen with here. So these three fields get copied over to these three fields, subfields in this data structure. So that is what we are doing with email card. I would suggest that whenever you get time, always start exploring these new built-in functions or these new opcodes that are there. This is not a new one. This is pretty old one, but I haven't seen much of them using this, but this reduces a lot of efforts. So I have reduced 3 lines of code here with just one opcode, which is doing the same thing. Okay. And with this formatting, when I call this, I'm getting a proper brackets and a hyphen to that number. Whenever the email address is more than the suggested length, which would be like 18 or something, in this case, it's adding 3 dots at the end. So this was the requirement for this file, so I've written it in this way. Okay. Now, jump on to another. So first I'll jump on to this code. This is one of the code that we had done just for making you understand that how people write a code smartly, and how, if that is not being documented well, how others would tend to make mistakes in. So here, this is a simple code that we have done. We are just doing finding the even numbers of whatever number is been sent by the user. What we are doing is that this is the first procedure where we are doing is that whatever number we get, we have declared a standalone variable inside, and that standalone variable would be 0 in the beginning, but still we have declared it with 0. So for number is equal to 0 to whatever the number that was sent by the user. And if that number post dividing with 0 returns a 0, post dividing with 2 returns a 0, we display it as a even. So this is a function which everybody knows how we derive even from a number. Okay, so we are here getting a list of even numbers. Now this same thing is been optimized in a pretty different way. Here what we have done is we have eliminated the possibility of dividing it by 2 and understanding. What we have done is we have used a for loop, but now we have incremented by 2. So it's 0 is an even, 2, 4, 6, 8 till whatever is been declared. We are always going to get an even number because we are incrementing by 2. So this is an optimized way. It's not a bad practice to write an optimized code, but make sure that when you are writing such kind of a code, one might miss this part, because not everybody uses by 2 or down by 2, those kinds of expressions for the for loop. So make sure that whenever you're doing something like this, that for loop gets incremented by 2. Okay, so this becomes a learning curve for us, that we document it well so that it is understood by others that you are incrementing the for loop by 2 and not by the traditional way of by 1. Okay, now considering that we have the same thing going on, but here we have the 2 and from and to two variables. So I want from 5 to 19, I want all the even numbers. The same thing is happening from the above function is used in the same way. Okay, instead of 0, we have just initialized with whatever is coming as the from number. The same goes here as well, but here, as now we don't have a 0, we don't know what would be the initial starting point. So what we have done is we have optimized it here. What we have done is whatever number we've got, we have first checked it once to understand if the number that we have received is not an even number. If the reminder is not zero, which means it's an odd number, what we have done is we have incremented that by one and added it to a standalone variable. And then what we have done is we have taken the for loop in a way that we are initializing the number variable with the from number variable that was derived here and by 2 till whatever the limit was specified by the user. So these are the ways you can optimize it. Okay, but make sure that whenever you are optimizing, you are thorough to document it. This is one of the code that we have. Okay, I won't go to this one, rather I'll go to this one. Yeah. So here we have documented it well. Okay, at the same time, this is the entry parameters. So what we have done is we have made sure that those are prefixed with IN underscore, and whatever is going to be an out is going to be an out underscore. Whatever is being declared as an IN constant, which would ensure that none of the values will get modified and go back to the caller with a modified value. So constant would ensure that. Okay. Now, if you see here, we have all of these as char because we are going to call this from CL. So to avoid the hassle of identifying if it is a varchar and what is the length, we have made sure that we are passing it as a char. So we are receiving it as a char, not a varchar. But when we are passing it to our functions inside, so if you see here, we do not have any standalone variable in here in the global part. We just have a standalone constant, but we don't have a standalone variable. What we have is a data structure, which is a template we are going to use. Now, this is also a good practice. I'll talk about this before we jump on. What we have done is we have done a purge object name template. And what we have done is we have taken a name and that has a varchar length of 640 and that has a dimension. And for that dimension, we already have an index. So this index is for this array. So this is an array within a data structure and the index of that array is also within a data structure. Instead of declaring an array individually and an index individually, having them clubbed together and declared within a data structure gives you a lot of benefits. So whenever you clear that array, the index also gets cleared. The array also gets cleared. So the data structure gets, whenever you clear a data structure, both of them get cleared. So you don't have to make sure that, hey, did I clear the, so when I've cleared the index, have I cleared the array, or when I've cleared the array, have I cleared the index? So whenever we are doing whenever you are clearing a data structure, everything within it is going to get cleared. Okay. Yeah. This is one of the practices that we've been using since 2014 and have reduced a lot of bugs that we've observed in production where the indexes were not cleared when the arrays were cleared, or the indexes were used by any other program or any other programmer for his array as well. And when we cleared it, his programs or his code got into an error or went on to a toss. Okay. Anything that we are going to send, we are sending it like any parameter that we are sending on a separate line. If you see here, every parameter is on a separate line. All those are going to be passed are having in, and what we are going to return back to the caller is an out, which we are returning from this procedure. Now these were all characters, but while we are transferring them from one procedure to from the main program to the procedure, what we have done is we have renamed, we have modified the type to a varchar, and then here we have used an option start trim. With this, these would get trimmed properly, and I don't have to use a person trim to it. So I can straight away pass them and start using them. Okay. Every function. So if you see here, this is what we are doing. We are validating a payload. So we are understanding if the payload is according to what the requirement was. If it was beginning with a SK, If it was ending with a .txt, we are doing a validation. So we are validating a payload. So what we have done is we have given the procedure name as is valid payload. At the same time, we have also declared a constant which resembles to what this procedure is and what a return should be. It is an indicator. So we have declared a constant and initialized with 1, and we have given it as a is underscore valid underscore payload. Okay. And depending upon the function, depending upon the logic, if it is a valid, we return a valid. And if it is not a valid payload, something fails in this if condition, we are returning a not is valid payload. So it would automatically convert this to a 0 when it is going to return back as an indicator from this procedure. So in the PI, we have declared that we are going, but we have instead return a not for this constant variable. So this works well. Okay. Here as well. What we are doing is we are processing the inbound. So as we are processing an inbound, we have declared a constant as processed inbound, or it would be a not processed inbound. The next part is doing or executing a QCMD exa. So what we are doing here is we are going to execute a copy from import file. So this is a command, a CL command that we are going to execute. So what we have done is we have declared a constant. We are given the complete name of what it is, copy from import file, and the command is being declared here. And the things or the values that we are going to pass as a parameter or going to be manipulated, we have declared with a curly braces and a 1, a curly braces and a 2. Now what happens is we move this value to the command string, which is a standalone variable or a local variable inside this procedure. So this is the local variable. We have moved this value over there. OK, this is moved. And now what we are doing is we are replacing the curly brace 1, the first parameter, and the second parameter with the values that we have received as a parameter to this procedure. So we have received two values to this procedure, and the same we are replacing in the same string. In this command string, we are replacing those values with the ones that we have received, and then we are going to execute that command string from a function. Now, what this does is this is just going to do a execute, is going to call the QCMD-exe API, but we have moved that into a service program so that it can be used anywhere by any program. Just wanted to show you that index related code. Yeah, so here is what we are doing. We have declared the purge object data structure from the template that we have declared above. So both are named same, just the template is given an underscore T at the end. OK. Now we are incrementing the index, and the same index is used for populating the value for that array. And then we are going to pass this to the prepare purge script. This is one of the functions that we have developed, and this is the data structure that we had developed. So we are not going to pass 2 or 3 values. We are just going to pass the data structure. So it would be received as a data structure in this procedure. Okay. Here we have received it, and now here we begin with the as well. We have passed it. And what we have done is for count is equal to 1. and then we have given the index. So my for loop is not going to run for 100 times. It is just going to run for as many indexes that were populated. So this is the second benefit. So I already know how much is my array populated. Is my array populated 10 dimension, or being it as a 100 dimension of array, have I populated till 10 dimension, or till 20, or till 100? It is already captured in this index because I'm just incrementing this every time. So even if my array index array dimension is 100, I am just going to run this or execute this for loop for as many times the index was incremented, be it 1, 10, 15, 20, 100. Only for that many times my counter is going to get incremented and my for loop is going to get executed. The second benefit of it. I think I have covered, but this is a service program. We are using a binding directory, and here we are declaring the symbols, the procedures as symbols. This is the binder source. Now the same we have done here. We have declared every procedure, every function inside the service program with a defined word, defined declarative. So defined, and the same name is given over here. So whenever we want to use this, we have to make sure that we are going to use a define and then the function that you have to use. Okay, this is the declaration part of it. Here we have declared a data structure inside this declaration. So if you want to use this, and we need to have the result of the data structure, we don't have to declare this same inside your program again. We can just do a like ds to this, and the same structure would also be available in your code. Try to make use of templates as much possible, and this is the service program. Yeah, one more thing that was on my list was using. Not sure, I don't have it here. Okay, here we have declared modularly like execute command. So we are executing a command using the QCMD API. So we have declared the name as well as execute command. We are executing this inside a monitor block. If it executes correctly, we are going to return a command executed, which is this. And if it does not, if it fails, we are going to return a not command executed. The same goes with preparing and executing an SQL statement. Okay, here we are giving the SQL string as a name, then we are going to have a declared constant declared as statement executed or not executed. And the next thing is called state. It's it's a highly old practice that we use an SQL code to validate if the SQL statement was executed. Okay, it is advised to not use SQL code, instead use an SQL state. So we have seen code, or everybody has seen a code where they are using an SQL code and they are checking if it is 100, if it is 0, that way to understand if the file was read till end, or if the command was executed of the or the SQL statement was executed successfully. But SQL code would be differing on every database. So if it is DB2, SQL code would be different for certain cases. If it is an Oracle database, it is going to be a different one. So to eliminate that, they have come up with SQL state. So it is advised that everybody uses SQL state instead of SQL code. SQL state would be common across any database, be it Oracle, be it MongoDB, be it DB2, be it any. SQL states is the one that we should use. SQL state would always have 5 digits in it, and all 5 zeros would be that SQL statement got executed successfully. A single SQL code can have multiple SQL state is also one thing. So you would never understand what it failed for. You would get a generic SQL code of say 500, and then there would be 5 different SQL states within that, which might have one of that would have been executed, or one of that error state would have been possible due to which you got an SQL code error. So avoid using SQL code, start using SQL state for every SQL that you execute. Okay. Here as well, if you see, we have copy to import file being declared, the command is declared, and then we are slowly replacing every every parameter with the one that we have received. So it becomes easier for a person to understand. So this is called representing your code. And as I said earlier, writing code is not a duty, it is an art. It is an art. Writing code is an art. Make sure that you write the code in a way that it is representing your skills. At the same time, it is also complying to the standards. At the same time, it is also giving a clear picture for a person who's going to come back and maintain this code. Because a program is not going to be your proprietary. So your program would always also be modified by someone else, and nobody would like other person cursing you for the the wrong practices that you have used in your code, which makes his life difficult when modifying your code. He's always going to look at the modification log and say, oh, was this modified by Ashish? Such a bad programmer. He could have done this in a better way. At least the code could have been more readable. He's not going to understand what were the circumstances when I wrote that code, but he's going to curse me definitely if it is not a readable code. People always say that if it is a complex code, it is going to be ugly. It is not the case. How much ever it be complex to develop, it can be modularized and it can be made manageable, maintainable, readable. Not in this entire service program, you would never find any function that is more than 20 lines. If it is going beyond that, we have created a new procedure, new function, used it multiple places. And what standard we follow is that we declare the procedures with a lowercase. Then wherever there is a change in the noun or a verb, the first character goes uppercase. The same goes with the next change in verb or noun. Okay. Every variable, be it a parameter, be it a standalone, is going to be a lowercase and separated by an underscore. So variables would be underscore separated. Procedures would not have any separation. Okay. Standalone variables also separated with an underscore, all lowercase. Okay. Yeah, this is a constant. Constant should also be underscore separated, but they'll always be in uppercase. They'll always be in uppercase. You can see a lot of constants here. So all of these are
Okay, thanks
sorry,
Ashish
all
for
constants
this
are
wonderful
uppercase.
session on the coding standards and
All
naming conventions. Now, please, if you have any questions, raise your hands. We are well above time, so we'll take few questions before winding up.
Hello, sir.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Sir, can you share a Skype group link, sir?
We have shared the Skype group link in the chat. You can join from there. We also shared the assignment link. You can save that link and start doing the assignments for the topic which have been completed till now.
Also, if you have any question, you can just raise your hand and we will allow you to unmute and then you can ask the question.
Hello, sir. What is procedure?
Procedure is like a function in other programming language. What the function is a procedure in RPGLE where you can pass in the some parameters and you can return an output. And for example, let's say you are using a built-in function %rem. So in a way that is also a procedure which is accepting two numbers and which is returning the output. So you can have a block of code written inside a procedure and you can call it anywhere in the program multiple times as well. And it will can return a value if you want. In the further sessions, you will get to know more about that. For now, in today's session, you can just take away the coding standards and how the indentation and how the naming convention is done.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Hello.
Hi, Sahil.
The start trim function works same as the SQL trim function or has some different functionality.
Can you repeat your question again?
So the starting function is used for what? To remove the spaces or the specific character we want to remove from the dataset or what? Or does it have the same functions as SQL?
Which function are you talking about?
Start trim function, sir. Trim function.
%trim, no?
Yes, sir.
That is the same function. In SQL, we have trim, and in RPGLE, we use %trim. Both trims the trailing spaces.
Space or remove to extra spaces or the characteristics.
Yes, from the start and the end.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
I cannot understand all OK function in SQL.
In SQL all OK, that was a constant which was declared with the value of 0000. So then in the program, it was checking whether the SQL state is equal to SQL all OK. That means SQL state is equal to 0000. It was just a named constant whose value was 0000. So instead of checking the value as 5 times 0, it was using a constant which has the same value.
If any error, then
In that case, the value of SQL state will not be 00. So it will not be compared with. It will be later compared with all OK, and it doesn't satisfy the condition in that case.
sir, thank you.
Okay, I think we are well above time. So if you still have any questions, you can join the Skype group and post your questions over there. And